Well, hello. Oh, so excited. We're live. Hello, Ryan. Hello, Brandon. Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Diane Howe, and I've got my friends here, Ryan and Brandon. And this is our first live stream where we are actually wanting to open up a conversation as parents to help other parents raising children in this kind of crazy, tech-filled world. So Brandon and Ryan and I have been talking a lot, and we all have kids of our own. We share a lot about what they're going through with school, the games they're playing, the things they're learning, whether they should have a phone of their own, and all these things. And we just have been talking about this a lot, and we know that other parents have questions and want to have these conversations too. And so we wanted to start creating some content and have these live streams where we can basically just have some conversations around all kinds of things. We've got a lot of ideas about what we can cover in these conversations, but we just wanted to let everybody know, like, this is absolutely a safe space. So whether you have felt like maybe you missed the mark getting your kids set up online and you've run into some challenges, or whether you're have young kids and you're thinking about this and you're like, oh, it's coming, their friends are starting to get on mobile devices, they're starting to ask for things, and you're feeling a little bit uneasy, we want you to know this is a safe place, and we want you to have conversations with us, because that's what we're going to do tonight. So we're going to be talking tonight about mobile devices. This definitely came up. This has come up a couple times in our conversations because my daughter recently got her first kind of full-on phone. She's had a hand-me-down phone that didn't have any cellular data on it at all for a long time, but she's kind of fully has her own account now. So we've been talking about this, but we know that a lot of parents also have concerns and questions, and so we're going to kind of talk about that. But Ryan, why don't you do us a favor and tell us a little bit about why you're excited about this conversation that we're going to be having?
Yeah, so thanks, Mel, for this, and I think it's the good opportunity to just really discuss this. We're like you said, we're all parents as well. I have a 12-year-old, 9-year-old, 6-year-old, and 3-year-old, and my background is computer science, and so I'm seeing technology evolve very rapidly as my kids are getting to the age where they're going to have a phone or message with their friends, and so um, there's just some things that I've tried, and I'm by no means like this is still a constant battle for us. We haven't completely solved anything, but hopefully through these discussions, we'll learn from each other. You as the viewers can chime in with ideas that you have, questions that you have as we move along, and we'll try to answer those the best that we can.
Yeah. I know that we all are very much wanting everyone to know that we are parents right here with you, shoulder to shoulder, kind of talking about this. So, Brandon, you're up, my friend. Why don't you tell everybody why you also felt really good and strong about this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. I'm really excited to be talking about this. The funny thing is like Ryan and I work together a lot, and we've known each other for so long. And I'm still learning new ways to manage this kind of conversation, this kind of topic from him, and we just keep bouncing ideas back and forth. So I'm really excited about this because I'm sure I'm going to learn something too that I hadn't even thought of. But I'm excited to maybe offer something to the parents to try to help them out, because I work with several people who have asked me, like, what do you do? And so I think this is going to be a natural conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I know that we've got some things that we want to cover. And if you're watching, definitely let us know if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have anything to share, anything to add at all. We would love for you to let us know in the comments. So we will be looking for those comments as well. Ryan, why don't you get us kicked off when you're going to be talking about really kind of like the foundational element of some of this, which is really getting started with all this stuff. So, yeah, Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brandon and I work together teaching coding to young kids in East Central Indiana, and part of questions we get asked by parents all the time is how do we kind of monitor our kids? How do we limit our kids? How do we make sure that they're being productive with what they're doing with technology? And I think that's something we forget. But there are some things to set up initially that makes your life a lot easier as a parent as you're going along. And so I'm going to share this, and these are just some general tips. And this doesn't matter what platform you're on. If you're an Android user, if you're an iPhone user, or even on PCs or video game consoles. The very first thing is All of these software platforms already have a lot built in. Specifically, when you're creating an account and it asks for your birth date. And so if we're creating an account, just think of it as like a profile on Netflix that you set up for your kids. But if you're setting up an account on your phone, make sure that you enter your kid's birthday correctly. A lot of these tools are already built in to kind of manage chat features and manage who can contact your kids just based on that age that you put in. I made the mistake early on of creating a Gmail account for my 12-year-old. This was 4 or 5 years ago to have an email account, and I put the wrong birth date in because it was limiting some things, and we've been fighting that since. And so it was a lot harder to go back later and change that and to impose those limitations after the fact than it would have been just to set that up properly to begin with. Fortunately, I learned from that, and now my 9-year-old has he's able to reap the benefits of what I've learned with that. For all of these tools, we need to look for an app or a website that allows you to set up these parental or family controls. And that's the keywords that you look for whenever you're looking for an app or whenever you're looking for a website to manage this, is parental or family. Almost every single tool, every single platform has something built in. And so just take advantage of tools that are already in place. If you share a device with your child, maybe they're logging into the same computer as you, maybe they have a profile on your phone or your Kindle, make sure that you sign out of yours before you give it to them. All right. So kids are crafty. They figure things out. If you hand them a phone logged into your account, they can easily go in and kind of decouple that and mess up some of the work that you're doing. Right. So not everything that we're saying is foolproof, but being ahead of your kids a little bit when you can. And that's what this fourth bullet is. Understand that no technology is complete. So we must have conversations with our kids about this, what they're seeing on social media, what their friends are sharing or maybe participating in, and making sure that we have an understanding of what's going on. I mean, we would do that in other avenues of our kids' life, which friends they're hanging out with at school. We try to understand that. So it's the same thing with this digital footprint that they're putting out there. And then last but not least, your home router, and this doesn't necessarily work if your kid has a phone with cellular data, right? They can get on their cellular network and it bypasses your home router. But for younger kids that are on Wi-Fi or have devices that are always using Wi-Fi, you can set up your home router to kind of manage a lot of that. And Xfinity, I know, handles that for you if you do that, or you can buy your own router. And most of the software is pretty straightforward to be able to set up restrictions to make sure that the content is limited on what your kid is seeing. So those are kind of the generic, like, this is where we should start if we are setting up profiles for our kids on these platforms.
Yeah, and I loved what you said about, the making sure that you're logged out. I know that's, I think, how most parents get started when it comes to their kids being on mobile devices, is they're using their mobile devices. Right. And, not only, just be cautious about that anyway, but even if you have, and Brandon's going to talk about some of the ways that we can set up, some parenting controls and some screen time limitations and some things. But let's say, your kid, is, oh, I forgot my phone, or my phone's dead. Mom, can I use yours? Keep in mind when you do that, as you said, kids are crafty. I'm in a text thread with my high school best friends, and I opened this conversation up earlier, and even talking with others. I mean, so many parents are like, kids are smart. They find a way around the things that we create. And so, as you said, nothing's foolproof. But something that kind of hit me was, when you are going to let your kid use your device, also be aware that they can log in to these apps that Brandon's about to talk about and make changes to the settings. I mean, they can change some of those controls. So definitely keeping an eye out for that stuff for sure. So no, that's really good. I appreciate all the stuff you said, because if you don't get started correctly, then it's harder to kind of come backwards with it. In all of this that we're talking about, I do think that, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, Addie, obviously my daughter, she was, starting on, little very basic things. I'm talking like the Mickey Mouse app, and things like that, at a very young age. But then, she wanted to start to have her own stuff. And so I remember, taking one of my old phones, I just basically turned it into an iPod. And
Mhm.
I think that's how a lot of kids actually get started with their own device, is that it's a hand-me-down device, but it's not actually activated with cellular data. Do you guys think that that's how most kids are getting started these days?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually how we started my oldest. We got him a real basic, simple tablet, one that I knew I could keep off cellular data, but also manage from afar. So I was able to kind of monitor and keep track on how much time he's spending on there, what is he doing, things like that. The other thing I think is funny, Ryan mentioned logging out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give him your passcode either.
Mm-hmm.
I know
Sometimes
it's
it's
so
easy to do
easy.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. Just, hey, punch this in. You can get to what you want. But once they know that, you have to change it because you're right. You're just giving them the keys to everything. So I wanted to point that out too. It's really easy to just say, yeah, just do this one time. But it just creates a different kind of habit you probably don't want.
That's a great point, actually. And I mean, we think our kids, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember anything anymore. I mean, I can't, it's like, so I mean, they will remember it. You say it once, it's locked into their brain. They know it, especially if it's because they know how powerful it is. So Brandon, let's talk about some of the apps. So, there are apps that are most of the, like iOS, Windows, Android, they actually have built-in, apps and things and software that we can use. But there's also other apps maybe where we can actually maybe create what I would call some walls, some barriers. It's like building your little fort to try to protect your child. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of that stuff?
Yeah. Really, the big two is Google and Apple, right? And they provide their own apps or their own family settings, parental settings, things like that, that you can set up on your computer or on your phone, and then download the apps to your phone and to your kids' devices as well. And that's where Ryan was talking about. It's really important when you set up those accounts that you set them up with the right ages, the right email addresses, everything like that, so that those apps, right out of the box kind of start doing their thing. So the big two is our Google Family Link, and then the Apple. But I would also say, these aren't as popular now because there's really no Microsoft phones, right? But Microsoft Family Safety is another big one because almost every computer we use, with the exception of Apple, which we talked about, is a Windows or Microsoft device. And so the Microsoft Family Safety actually spans cross phones, cross consoles like the Xbox, and computers too. So, I mentioned the big two that are phone developers, but one that has been a huge one for us and in my family is the Microsoft Family Safety, which is really easy to set up and manage from your device and or a web browser, any web browser. So those are the big three that I kind of point anyone to because they are free. They're not apps that you have to pay for. They're not apps that you don't really know what data they're tracking, anything like that. We're all pretty familiar, right, with what Google, Microsoft, and Apple do track. So it's a lot easier. And honestly, like for me, we use our Gmail accounts for connecting to just about anything, right? So it's just easier to flow it through those family settings. And through the family link and through the Google Play Store, we can create our own kind of family unit and share movies, games, books, anything that we buy on the Google Play Store. And I have full control of which ones my kids get, which ones that the parents get, which is really nice. So those are the big three that I would probably start anyone on.
Love it. Okay. So we have a really interesting question from Derek McLean, who first said, he said he's in a parenting in a tech world Facebook group. And he said it's helpful, but it's also equally scary. I know that when I opened up the conversation with some of my friends, it is. They all said that. And it is. I remember, thinking like, okay, how can I possibly protect my child from everything? Because the other thing I think that's interesting is that I feel this way. And you guys are way savvier than I am at this stuff, but I feel like there's so much I still just don't know. Like, my daughter's wanting Snapchat, and my initial thought is abso-freaking-lutely not, like no way, but a lot of her friends have it, and a lot of her friends have TikTok access, and they've had it, and I see stuff and I'm like, I know I hear bad things, but I also know that there's a whole world of stuff I don't know. And so it definitely is scary. That for me is what creates the most anxiety for me. And I think a lot of parents probably, are even just because of that fear, they're not ready. Right. But at the same time, again, we are raising kids in a technology filled world. They are using devices at school, and heck, my daughter's showing me how to do things on my device, outside of her using her phone. But I mean, what do you guys have any thoughts around, like, that fear factor, like parents just feeling that fear, because it is scary. And I know that we are probably going to be talking about a lot of that type of content in some of our upcoming shows, especially when it comes to games and online gaming and other things. But when you think about it, like, okay, well, I'm scared. Like, how can a parent actually get informed? I guess is really where I'm kind of at, is how can they learn something so that they don't feel, well, let me back up. I think we're all always going to be a little bit scared. We should be. But at the same time, how do we overcome that so that our children can be modern, right? Like, that's really kind of what this is about, is being relevant and being modern. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've been asked the question too about some of the apps, and would I let my kid at some age download some of the apps. I think the first thing is to actually, like, download the apps as a parent, and actually use those apps. I'm not all that interested in making videos of myself, like on TikTok, right? I'm not interested in that.
I am.
That's right. But I can log in, and I can review what kind of content is being kind of pushed to me as a person, as an adult, and like knowing that my kid is probably going to have the same content, or like probably worse given the age group, pushed towards them. And so, like, I think downloading those apps is a great way to start, just to feel them out. I think having conversations like this with other parents, like, what do you think about this app? Have you heard about this? Just so that we can be better informed. And I think that's part of it, is just that the technology changes so quickly that, that we're left behind. The kids are learning this from their friends at school. They're with their friends 8 hours a day at school. They're bringing home these ideas of these different apps and different things. And really, whenever parents jump on a platform like that, we see an exodus of the kids, right? It's not cool anymore once the parents start getting on there. Facebook is to, once my parents and grandparents started getting on there, then lots of younger people left Facebook, and that's not quite as popular with a younger age group now than some of the other platforms. But I think just downloading and kind of learning.
Yeah, I agree. Brandon, what do you think about that? I loved it. I was thinking, like, Derek's in this Facebook group, like that to me is actually, that sounds great, but it does. I also am like, oh my God, you're going to hear so many horror stories. And I know sometimes I'm guilty of, man, I sometimes just don't even want to know some things, because I think I'm going to literally, like, lock her in her room and never let her leave the house. Like, you know what I mean? Because I'm terrified. But I don't know, Brandon, how do you kind of balance that? You have older kids, than Ryan and I. Our kids are younger than your oldest kids. So how did you approach that? Uh-oh, we're losing him. Brandon, are you there?
I'm back, I think.
You are.
Mid-question, you went blank on me. So can you go ahead and repeat that?
Yeah, I was saying you have older kids. Your older kids are older than our kids. And, how did you approach that? Like, that whole balance of, you're afraid to let them, go into this world, but yet at the same time, it's kind of a necessary, a natural progression. Like, how did you approach it? How did you inform yourself?
Yeah, so I agree with Ryan. When you can, try it out yourself, kind of get familiar with it, understand what the point is of the app, and what goes on, and that's helpful. And I guess my rule of thumb is, when we send them to school, we have no control what they're going to hear, see, or do anyway. right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of a social contract there with the school and with your kids, like to try to create that safe environment. But truth is, whenever there are other people, the app may not be used for what it's intended. And you have
Mm-hmm.
to know and understand that right away. And you also have to be willing to talk to your kids about that, right? At school you have to act a certain behavior. What happens when people go outside that behavior? There are consequences. So understanding that, hey, some kids your age use it for this. Talk to them. If you don't approve of that, you need to set that up front, because the worst thing you can do is let that go on for 2 months and then try to put the hammer down, because you've already kind of set up an unspoken contract, right? So I think the first things is try it out. Second thing is just talk to them up front and say, hey, I'm giving you some trust here. I'm going to trust that you're going to use this the right ways, or ways that that we would be approving of that. And if you do these things, or you kind of go outside this realm, these are the consequences. One thing that we did in our family is, once we gave them their phones, we waited until they were middle school, because once they hit middle school, oh my gosh, kids get so much busier.
Mm-hmm.
They're after school every day. They're doing sports. They're at games. We got to pick them up at oddball times, right, all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So we knew, we're like, we need to have a phone for them. But we also explained, we pay for the phone. So technically, that phone is our phone. You're leasing it from us. So we actually have a rule in our house. We have to know your password, and we get in the passcode, because if we have any concerns, we can take a look at it. And I really didn't talk about some of the benefits of those apps I mentioned, but those apps can notify you what games, apps they are downloading, and you can control some that you will block entirely. So if you don't want them to have Snapchat mail, if you don't want Addie to get it, you can actually block that, ahead of time, and
Mm-hmm.
she can't download it without going through you.
Right.
And those apps are lifesavers, because they set up some guardrails for you
Mm-hmm.
to help you out.
Yeah, right now Addison can't download any apps on her phone. It basically we're Apple, so we're using iOS, and she's set up at as a family member, and
Mhm.
so I have it set up where she can't. It pings my phone and says, Addison would like to download this app. We have conversations about it, because when this first started, I was getting notifications. I'm like, what is this? So I said, hey, don't even do it unless you come talk to me first, right? Like, I'm not going to approve it. So we definitely set up, some of that. And I do like that. But the things that I have found too is that I like what you both said about get in the app yourself. Like, get in there yourself, make sure you understand what it is. Because there are, TikTok is a great example. It's growing in popularity. There's a lot of stuff on there that is very inappropriate for children. And the problem is that at the same time, kids are also mimicking what they're seeing. They're creating similar types of content, whether they're just texting it to their friends or not. So, TikTok's one, but there's also other applications that are very similar to TikTok, and they're kind of marketed like they're supposed to be friendlier. They're not. They're not any better. So I do think that, like what you guys said, looking at it, being into the app, understanding it, because there's also a difference between the device limitations you can set up with these security apps, these parenting control apps, but then there's the limitations inside some of these apps. And so you might think that they're protected, but inside the app, you aren't able to control that. And we have some awesome comments and questions here I want to get to too, but this is kind of related. Ashley says, we know Ashley, don't we, Ryan?
A little bit, a little bit.
She
Sounds familiar.
says, she's talking about, this is a great point. Like, kids are getting smart. Like, they know that we're going to be looking at their phones. They know we're going to be checking. And so they are getting smart. Like, she's like, what happens when your kid finds out how to clear their searches? That is a great point. But Brandon, some of the apps that you mentioned, and I know that there's also another one called Life 360 that's very popular. I know some of my friends are talking about that in our chat, that monitors, it like almost records activity. Is that one of the ways to kind of still be able to monitor what's going on, or do you know?
Yeah, so it's not everyone's favorite, but Microsoft Family Safety, you can actually block the use of Chrome, any other browsers except for Microsoft Edge. And what that does is, once that's connected, you can see everything they ever searched for, every website they've ever been to. You even have some controls to kind of steer them in the right direction. But yeah, the kids are getting smarter, but you can do some things up front that just kind of says, here's your path, here's what you can use, and you can do the same thing for phones as well. And I actually have a story of that. My son, as he was getting older, was searching for things that, every teenage boy probably
Research. He was doing
researches
research.
once in a while. His excuse was, I was just curious, but I saw those searches and I
Mm-hmm.
got those notifications and I had the conversation with him right away. And I said, I didn't come at him, as I'm going to punish you and not, in an accusatory way, but it was like, hey, I'm recognizing that you're searching for these things. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you curious about that information? And it just allowed me to not let that habit fester to a point where we have an actual problem, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can definitely set some guardrails for your kids with some of these apps, including the search history. He could delete his search history, but I already have it. It's on my app, so I already know.
Yeah, and I think
That's
I
good to
think it's
know.
important what you were saying, Brandon. That well, I mean, sometimes there is a curiosity factor, right? Like kids heard
Mhm.
of this
Right.
term or this thing at school. We don't want them to be so embarrassed or so so afraid to tell mom and dad that they don't even come to us after that fact, right? So I think um, being aware of kind of the situation as a whole. Are they searching this just because somebody said it and they truly are curious to find out about this, or if it's something that's repeated over time, then those are different situations in my opinion, and how we handle those. And so we want kids to use the technology, that we have instant access to information about anything ever at our fingertips, right? And so why wouldn't we
Mm-hmm.
want our kids to use that in a productive way? And so if they're curious about something, I mean, that would be the logical thing for them to do, is to search for that. And
Mhm.
so, but we just want to make sure that they're okay saying, "Hey, Dad, I searched for this, and like I didn't really know what it was, and this is what came up." And like it's going to be hard to get any teenage kid to do that. But I think having those tools, Brandon, to what you were saying, you can have that conversation early before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really like what you said. I mean, we want them to use this technology. They're going to use this technology. Eventually they are going to be citizens of society and they're going to be
Right.
outside of your view. And it's best to kind of try to form these healthy habits and healthy relationships with the technology so that hopefully when they're adults, they're using it responsibly in a variety of ways, whether it's communication, research, whatever habits they find themselves interested in.
Yeah. I love that you're both addressing, and this is how I felt, is that, I didn't feel like, I mean, I knew this was coming, right? Middle school, same reasons. Brent, it's like, oh my gosh. I remember last year there was a time when I was going to be late picking her up, and I literally was like, I have no way of like telling her I'm going to be
Mhm.
5 minutes late. She's going to be standing out there in the dark, like after volleyball practice, and I'm just like freaking out, and I'm just like, so there is definitely a convenience for all of us when we let our children have these tools. But then again, there's a lot of responsibility. And it's all about, I think, like you both said, embracing that this is a thing, but also like approaching it with a good foundational start. And I know a lot of parents, I've talked to a lot of people, I feel this way too, especially when I'm going to read one of the messages from one of my friends. It's like, oh man, I didn't do that, or okay, I should do more of that. And that's why we're having these conversations, is we want to help parents, we want to help people hear how other parents are doing things. So I love this. One of my friends said, my oldest is the only one with a phone, and he had to sign a contract with both households. So they, live in a divided, divorced family, and with both households for the rules and what will happen if he breaks them. Also, he has to hand the phone over whenever either of us requests it, and he leaves it upstairs when he goes to bed at night. Somebody else said, uh, also be prepared for them to know everything they want to know just by searching for it. Super important to keep those lines of communication open. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about, for sure, People are talking about, making sure that you are checking regularly, but what are we checking, right? So I do think that this is good. The thing that's interesting is that, like, I don't have a contract with Addie, right? But I think that, Brandon, I think you mentioned that you have a contract with your children. What, like, this is something that I know that we've gotten questions about. And, I actually love Derek's comment here, and I want to address it in a second as well. Because if we're talking about, okay, here are the rules, here are the boundaries. And if you break those rules, there will be consequences. And following through, as a parent is important. But when you think about, like, I mean, what does that look like? Like a contract? I mean, I've never even thought of it, to be honest with you. And I'm still I'm not totally sold that a contract is really going to do anything. Maybe it's just a tool for me to go back and be like, nope.
It's not legally binding anyway. We're not
Right.
18, so it doesn't.
But I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I want to talk about Brandon's thoughts too, about like using it as like a reward and discipline tool. And I think he's onto something here. So, but what are your guys' thoughts on the contract?
Ryan, you want to take this first one?
Actually, none of my kids are of the age that we have cellular data, so everything's still kind of managed within those tools. Yeah, my oldest has got a flip phone that when he texts me, he has to like punch in the number 2 like 2 or 3 times to actually get the right letter to show up. So that's what we've used for him, like when he had swimming practice or something where he was late, and that's what he had to use for a little while. So we don't really have necessally yet anything like a
was it like a Nokia?
Like, yeah, it was like give me whatever, like Alcatel wireless, like some like pay as you go that we ended up using. I mean, I think I do want to jump on to using electronics as rewards and discipline tools. I think there's a lot of good things there. Like, so for me, I've identified productive technology versus technology for enjoyment, or technology for playing games, or technology for that. And so a lot of, times we have screen time, or we kick the kids off at a certain time. They're still allowed to do some things like use Scratch or use some of the coding tools that my son's over here actually doing right now, probably past his bedtime, but he's over here coding right beside me. And so using some technology that I think is productive, that they're learning, that they're being creative with, is different, from at least for me, than for them sitting and watching YouTube, Mr. Beast on YouTube, or clicking something over and over, Friday Night Funkin', or whatever is popular these days. Those are different things, in my opinion, and so we treat them differently. I'm also of the Dr. Phil philosophy that what is the kid's currency, and a lot of times it is that device time or that screen time. So I am absolutely not afraid to use that as a disciplinarian tool, and it works well with my kids just because it is their currency. Like if they do something that earlier when they're younger, timeouts work. When they're older, timeouts from devices works. And so that's something that's at least worked for us.
I love that. I love that you talked about the currency. Like, what do your kids want? So use it as a reward system, but also as a disciplinary item. And if using these electronics, being in these games, having more screen time. So, as Brandon talked about earlier, those apps, you can set limits to how much they literally can be like, oh man, I'm out of time, and you can reward them with more time for good behavior and other things too. So I know a few parents that do that. But Brandon, talk about the contracts, but then also what are your thoughts on the whole rewards and disciplines for tools?
Yeah, so the contract's really just truly kind of an unspoken. There's nothing written. We didn't go to an attorney and make our kids go through that process. But I mean, the contracts again are just, we've set expectations as parents, what we expect from our kids at school, what we expect when you're in the care of another adult, what things are acceptable, when they're in that care, and what things are not acceptable. And also on the flip side, what do we feel is acceptable for the adult to do? What do we feel is not acceptable for the adult to do? So we've set those kind of standards early on, and we just kind of carried them over into the phone. So similar. It's screen time currency, things like that. But what we often do is we just allot a certain amount of time every day that they can have. On the weekends, we usually increase it a little bit for them. And then there are certain apps, though. I agree with Ryan. There's productive and unproductive screen time. There's just certain apps, though, that you may have 3 hours that I've allotted you for the entirety of a Saturday, but this one particular app, I don't want you spending more than an hour, because I feel like that's more than enough, right? To go down a rabbit hole and just glaze over and not be productive in any way. But I've also rewarded more time, because I've had similar cases where my oldest, he used maybe 2/3 or most of his time working in Scratch, working in something, creating. He likes to write as my oldest likes to write as a kind of a therapeutic thing. And he spent an hour and a half to 2 hours one day writing kind of a short story. And then when the night came and he wanted to play games with his friends, but he was out of time, he approached me and I was like, yeah, you know what? You used your time wisely. I feel like, yes, I can give you an hour here, I can give you an hour there. And when there's like birthday parties or really unique situations, family are over, and we know that the electronics are going to be heavy in use because they're playing games with their cousins, we increase their time. We don't try to hold them to something that's unreasonable, where you had 3 hours and we forced you to play with your cousins for 2 hours, and sorry that now you're out of time. But from the social contract, though, it's more, it's just, what are the expectations? Have we been consistent? There are times when we can show leniency and there's times when we can't. And it's actually interesting. I feel like I'm really lucky, but my oldest, he knows when his screen time ends every night. But he's also one that he does cross country after school. He's in band. He's, in high school. He's a freshman. A lot of his evenings eaten up. So knowing that, he actually set up his own schedule every night to make time for those games. But then after his screen time shuts off, he does his chores. And at first I was kind of like, dude, I don't know. Are you really going to do that? You're going to be tired. He's done it. So he's kind of written his own contract with me and saying, this is how I want to manage my time so I can still get my screen time, still have this kind of recreational period, but I can still get the jobs done that you give us every night.
Yeah, you are lucky, Brandon. You're very
I know.
fortunate. But I'm going to
I
go
know.
ahead and say it must be because you and Miranda are just such great parents. You've done such a great job that there you go, right? Like I will say that, but I love it. I keep going back to what Ryan said about currency, but I also love what you guys were saying about productive screen time, right? Like productive screen time, because I do think that's something that I've been looking for my own daughter. And that's one of the reasons why I have always been so passionate about what you guys are doing here at TechWise Academy. And it's why I've decided to kind of just, partner up with you and work with you guys and help you guys with these conversations. But, one of the things that I love is that, whether it be, because I think some parents are looking for that too. I think especially during, the pandemic, especially when a lot of kids were at home, parents were looking for, I know I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm working, like I can't fully entertain her all day long. And I want her to be able to use technology, but I don't want it to just be like what Ryan was talking about earlier. And so that productive screen time. And so, I want to just take a super fast moment here and just point out that, you guys have built this amazing course. It's an online course that kids can take during the evenings, and that's productive screen time. And you guys were talking about Scratch, and that's essentially what this is. These kids can learn how to code, and they're learning a little bit of this in school, but they're really not. A lot of kids we're discovering are not taking the deep dive because, quite frankly, the teachers aren't coders. The teachers aren't tech people. So, if that's something that anybody watching is interested, I just kind of wanted to make you aware that there's this amazing course. But what's really cool, and I'm going to totally toot my own horn and take the credit for this one, but there's this parents course that Ryan created as well, because I know as a parent, watching my daughter go through some of this stuff that she was learning, it was like worse than like trying to help her with like new math. I literally was like, I don't know what she's learning. So we created this parental, companion course. And so you're actually going to Ryan basically was like, okay, here's what your kids are learning, and here's what they should be doing, and because I wanted to be able to reward her progress, but I didn't know what progress looked like. So definitely wanted to just kind of make a quick nudge towards that. That's certainly not why we're here, why we're doing these live streams, but we were talking about productive parenting time, and I just want to say that if somebody's looking for that, then tech-wise, you guys have options, whether it be those in-person classes you have or the virtual online courses. So, so Tracy here, this is kind of a fun one actually, and it's related. I mean, it is because maybe she doesn't want to create a Facebook account, because I know even in my friend chat, a lot of my friends were like, social media accounts totally off limits, right? No way. And Facebook is absolutely social media. So, she says, I know this conversation is focused on mobile devices, but what about VR headsets? So that's the virtual reality headsets. We got our son an Oculus, but it required him to have a Facebook account. Is there a way around that? Do either of you guys know that? Because, I definitely do not want my child having a Facebook account, but maybe she would want to play with this super awesome, virtual reality game. So do you guys know? Do you guys have an answer for that one?
Your daughter wouldn't want a Facebook account with you following her on it, and like everything that she was posting was like,
and her grandparents and everyone else.
and you were like sending pictures and doing National Daughters Day and all this stuff and tagging her in it, right? Yeah. So Tracy, I did a little digging here on the side while we were chatting, and apparently there's not really a way around that for the Oculus. So you have to have that Facebook account. The only option is to get a business version of the Oculus, which is like twice the price. And so like why they have that set up that way, not really sure. And we're going to lose me.
You're good right now. We still hear you.
You can still hear me. All right. So my camera battery is shutting off. So
that's okay. You're good.
I'll keep talking, and I can switch that out in just a second, Mel, if you want to.
You are good to go.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I looked that up. You can't really get around that. I would recommend either using your Facebook account on that. If you have a shared one, that the parents have, that you could set up for that, or just create a dummy account, honestly, to be able to get around that, because they don't really have a way for us to do that. Oculus doesn't. So
that is a really interesting thing. I wonder what Facebook has to say about that. You know what I mean? I wonder if it's, I know that Facebook obviously is wanting everyone to have Facebook, of course. I mean, why wouldn't they, right? But at the same time, they have to understand and see that kids don't want Facebook. They don't want to be on Facebook for a lot of the reasons we talked about. And so, they're really missing out on an entire market if they can't answer to that. So that's really interesting. I'm surprised that is the way that works. So, Tracy, hopefully that you're still watching and you were able to get that answer from us. But man, I have to say, like, the dummy account thing, I would just say if you would do that, and then just making sure that you always have access to that. You know what I mean? Because again, you may be setting them up for something, right? Like, what if, like to Ryan's point earlier, like starting early, because if your kid didn't want Facebook, but all of a sudden now they have Facebook, well, now they may have access to things that you don't want them to have access to, right? So just kind of like look at that. But that's a great question. It's an interesting one for sure. So,
and if you do go the dummy route, I would just say make it a super strong password. Don't make it easy. It is easy to say, I'm just going to make this a really easy password. That way they can get in and out. But Facebook is just ripe for hackers because, there's 1 billion users worldwide. It's got a database that people want to get into. So just if you go the dummy route, please use a strong password and monitor that. Make sure that you have access to the email that is connected to it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I've got one last question that I want to ask you guys, because I see this coming up more and more. In fact, even with my own business marketing and stuff, my YouTube account is requiring this now. Bank accounts are starting to talk about it. But when it comes to kids, can you talk a little bit about two-factor authentication? Like, because I mean, you talk. There's email accounts and there's devices, and I mean, heck, anymore, I feel like there's two-factor authentication with just about everything. So how would this work when it comes to your kids and their devices?
So for us, probably the most common one is Roblox, because my daughter is not above a certain age limit, so she has to use a Roblox child account, and so I'm kind of by by default put over seeing her account. And so when she logs into Roblox, we have it set up with two factor authentication to actually email me with the code whenever she logs in, and that comes with its pros and cons. So when she was at a camp this summer, when she logged in on a computer that we don't manage, we don't know, don't use, I would get a random email saying, hey, your daughter's trying to log in. So I would have to text her, right? Like, is this you? you know
Yeah.
are you trying to get in here? And she'd have to verify. But the benefit of that, again, is uh, Roblox doesn't have screen time monitoring and things like that. So it just helps me as a parent kind of keep an eye on how often is she logging in and playing this game. And it gives me a chance to just at least be aware. I'm sure there's other popular two factors for kids. I don't know, Ryan, if you know any, but that's the most common one that we run into.
Yeah, actually, my son had his Roblox account hacked, and he hadn't set up two-factor authentication, and so like once it was gone, it was gone. He was actually part of the Builders Club and had a monthly fee attached to one of my credit cards, so we had to like contact Roblox. They couldn't get us the account back, but they could remove my card from that account. So fortunately, we were able to get past that part. But then he just learned a valuable lesson and setting up a strong password and using two-factor authentication. But so two-factor authentication, if you're wondering, you've probably used it and not really sure what that means. You might see it as TFA as an acronym on some sites that you're on. But it basically, honestly, I think it's an kind of elegant way to handle making sure that you are who you are when you log back into the account later. And so when you log into an account and it asks for your email address and for your mobile phone, what happens is if you log in again later, the system will automatically trigger a code that's sent to those things that you initially used when you set up the account, right? And so we've set up this account and we use these credentials. Later on, if someone guesses our password or brute force, uses our password to log into that system, it's going to send a notification to what you originally set the account up with, your original phone number and your original email. And so that way they won't be able to log in, even if they guess your password. So two factors, meaning that we're using the password to protect it, but we're also using those initial credentials that you used when you set up that account. So I think it's a great tool, and it is can be cumbersome and can be, we've had some issues in some of our classes where kids are logging in with Google accounts and it's sending a code to a certain device that they've used in the past. And we haven't been able to get around that really. And that's what it's designed for, though, is to not be able to do that and someone else is using your account. So make sure that if that's possible, that you can use, like Brandon said, use your parent phone number or your email address on their accounts, so that if they're logging in or if someone else is logging in, then you can protect your kids from that.
And I do have it set up on my kids' Google accounts. If they log into a new device, so let's say they log in on a different browser, different computer, it's not quite two-factor authentication, but it does email me and alerts me from a security feature. Someone logged into a device that Google didn't recognize as a common device they are using. So again, when they were at camp, I got a load of those, but at least I was able to kind of know. But it's another way to know early signs that, hey, this one might be hacked. And a lot of times they tell you like general location. So, if I see that it's a same town, great, I know it's my kid. But if you ever see one that's like another country, right away you got a problem. You got to get that fixed.
Yeah, because your kids aren't over in the other season. I love that you guys talked about this because to be totally honest with you, I mean, Addison's account also got hacked. Now, this goes back to conversations with our kids. And I think we talked about this earlier is, and I think and we are going to talk about this stuff. We're going to keep this conversation going. We're going to be doing this, every couple weeks. We've got another one of these set up here in a couple weeks. So please understand, we want you all to know, like, we kind of scratched the surface on a few things today. Like, Brandon, I'm pretty much going to need you to do a tutorial video on some of those things that you were talking about earlier, right? Like, I mean, there's so much there. So, but I remember Addison's account was hacked, and I was like, how did this happen? Like, but the thing that's interesting is the two-factor authentication, which I didn't even know that we could set that up. So we're gonna have a whole entire show on Roblox, just so everybody knows. We really are, because it is very popular. Kids are, it's crazy. So anyway, but I think what ended up happening is that she was tricked, right? She was tricked into, because there was a time when I happened to catch it where she was like trying to earn like free Roblox or Robux or something. And she's like, Mom, what's your email? And there's that really funny commercial out right now that's like, oh, I got his free parking. I gave him your social security number. Like it's like that stuff's all over the place. And these people are totally preying on the little kids because they don't know any better. And so it goes back to those conversations, making sure you're having those conversations and letting them know, like, but for me, I was like, how do you explain to a kid, like, don't log in where it tells you to log in? Like, we get those links, those sent emailed to us. We get those things where it's like, oh, you're, whatever, just log in. And they look like the same thing. So it's hard to teach a little kid that. But that's why I loved this two-factor authentication thing. And so, bet your butts I'm going to be going and making sure that's set up, because it's not set up right now on her Roblox account. And so I didn't even know that Roblox had that. So definitely.
You brought up another topic that we probably need to talk about is just phishing and spoofing emails.
Yes.
Like, it is so easy to fall for something, right? Because they've gotten better.
They've gotten
the
really
Nigerian
good.
prince example is not the common one anymore.
Yeah, it's they're getting really good. I mean, they really, really are getting really good. So that probably should be a future topic. But so this was awesome. If you are watching live with us, we appreciate it for sure. Like, I want you to know that we are going to keep doing this. So definitely make sure that you are subscribed. Oops, that's not going to show up. You're subscribed to our channel on YouTube, or if you rather watch on Facebook, that's totally fine too. Just make sure you're following the page and turn on those notifications so that you get the indication when we go live, right? And so definitely something that I want to make sure everybody thinks about, because we are going to be doing this again. We're going to be doing this more. I think this conversation is going to keep going. We want to do them live so that we can answer your questions. But we have topics that we have in mind. Like I said, Roblox, like, we're going to talk about Roblox, because, a lot of parents are like, my kid wants it, or my kid does it. I don't know what it is. I don't understand it. I watch them play it, and it looks like a game that was designed like 20 years. Like, it makes no sense to me. So we're going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about, like, what you guys said too, is some things to keep in mind, because there are some safety aspects to things like that as well. So October 20th is going to be our next show, not the 13th. Thank you, gentlemen. I don't know. I had the wrong date on there. Let me fix that. October 20th. I can do that right on the fly. Technology is fun. There you go. October 20th. There you go. Wednesday night, 8:30 again. So yeah, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that. But also, we want to know what you guys want to learn. So send us an email, send a DM to any of us, and give us your ideas. We want to know, because we're also going to be working on creating more YouTube videos as well. Like, Brandon, it's on your list. You're going to make us a tutorial on those parenting apps and all that stuff too. So, but this was fun. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you guys being willing to do it. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and until next time. So, anything else you guys want to say before we head out?
No, I had a lot of
all
fun.
Good.
I had a lot of fun.
I'm glad you did, Brandon. I'm glad.
Always fun hanging out with you too. Come on.
It's always fun, right? It's always fun. I know it's an evening thing, but we picked this time because we were thinking everybody's busy during the day, and this is kind of parent time. This is time for parents to kind of get together and chat with other parents and talk about this stuff. So
get ready for bed.
Yeah, and then now it's time to go get ready for bed. So whatever, Brandon's gonna go play games.
That's right. Like
All right,
I'm really immersed in just getting into what my kids are doing, so I'm playing all the games. You know, that's
I
why.
bet. That's why it's research for the children.
That's right.
I got it.
That's
I
right.
love it.
For the
All
children.
right. Well, gentlemen, until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. But everybody, thanks again for watching with us. And if you watch the replay, feel free to comment and let us know what you thought. Let us know what your ideas are for a future episode. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.